Something strange has been happening in the dating market, something almost nobody wants to acknowledge. For years, we were told that older women prefer younger men, that cougar culture was on the rise, that career-driven high-value women in their 40s and 50s naturally gravitated toward youthful energy, adventure, and the excitement they supposedly missed out on earlier in life. But when you actually look at the data, and more importantly, when you sit in a room with these women, the story isn't even close to the fantasy that's been sold to the public. I've spent the last decade counseling women in their 40s, 50s, and even early 60s, executives, doctors, attorneys, women who make more than most men will ever earn. And over the last 5 years, they've all been telling me the same thing, almost word for word. I don't want a younger man anymore. Not less interested. Not, maybe not right now. I mean, done. Finished. Closed door. And what's even more surprising is why. Because the reason they avoid younger men now has nothing to do with attraction. It has nothing to do with sex. And it has absolutely nothing to do with confidence, masculinity, or the usual talking points men hear online. The real reason is much more uncomfortable. And once I explain it, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Because it reveals a fundamental shift in power, psychology, and market dynamics that is permanently reshaping the dating behavior of high-value women over 40. And if you're a man between 35 and 65, you've probably felt this shift already, even if you couldn't name it. Let me break it down. The uncomfortable truth is this: high-value women over 40 are now avoiding younger men because the incentives have flipped. The cost-benefit equation changed, and these women are finally acting according to market logic instead of fantasy. I'm not telling you what I think. I'm telling you what I hear in real-world conversations with women who have nothing to prove and nothing to gain by lying. Women like Laura, 47, a corporate VP who told me, "I don't have the energy to raise a man again." Or Michelle, 52, who said, "I'm done being someone's growth project." These aren't emotional statements, they're economic ones. These women are doing math. They're evaluating risk, time horizons, emotional labor, asset protection, lifestyle compatibility, and psychological maturity. And when I map these stories onto the broader trends, falling marriage rates, rising female income, declining male mental health, shifting fertility timelines, the pattern becomes unavoidable. For high-value women over 40, younger men are no longer a fun option. They're a liability. Not because younger men are bad, not because they're unworthy, but because the market dynamics have changed so drastically that the exchange no longer benefits these women. You've probably seen this yourself. A younger guy puts in the effort, but she still isn't interested. She compliments him, but keeps him at a distance. She enjoys the attention, but refuses to invest. It's not personal, it's structural. And in the next section, I'm going to show you the 10 forces, psychological, economic, and biological, that explain exactly why this shift happened, how it affects men over 35, and what it means for the future of dating. Let me start with the point nobody wants to say out loud. For high-value women over 40, the maturity gap with younger men isn't charming anymore. It's expensive. When a woman is 28, dating a guy who's 24, the gap is manageable. They're both figuring out life. They both have room to grow. She still has years of emotional energy to spend. But a 45-year-old woman dating a 32-year-old man, that's a completely different economic equation. Here's what actually happens. She ends up doing the emotional heavy lifting. Not because she wants to, but because she has to. I had a client, Renee, 46, a senior litigation attorney. Successful, composed, and extremely self-aware. She dated a 33-year-old software engineer for 7 months. Smart guy, attractive, financially stable. But here's the pattern she described to me. Every conflict became a teaching session. Every disagreement turned into a lesson. It felt like mentoring a talented intern, not partnering with an equal. And here's the part most men underestimate. By 40, most high-value women have already spent 20+ years emotionally supporting men. They're exhausted. This isn't bitterness, it's market fatigue. Think about it like this. Emotional regulation takes energy. Conflict navigation takes experience. Maintaining relationship stability takes discipline. Younger men often haven't developed these skills yet, not because they're flawed, because they're earlier in their developmental arc. But for a woman in her mid-40s, that gap feels like a second job. And you've probably seen this play out. She tries to set boundaries, and he interprets it as rejection. She communicates clearly, and he thinks she's being intense. She provides structure, and he feels controlled. Ask yourself, how many men in their early 30s have the emotional conditioning of a man in his late 40s who's survived divorce, career failures, financial pressure, and life's hard edges? Not many. And high-value women know this. That's why the maturity gap isn't a cute dynamic for them anymore. It's a drain on resources. Pattern recognition. The more accomplished the woman, the less tolerance she has for emotional tutoring. And here's the uncomfortable truth. High-value women over 40 aren't looking for potential. They're looking for parity. The economic fantasy collapsed. For decades, the stereotype was that older women dated younger men for excitement, passion, and physicality, while younger men dated older women for stability and resources. That story worked when men controlled most of the financial power. But look at the numbers today. Women in their 40s and 50s are hitting peak earning years. Corporate leadership has more high-earning women than ever. Female-owned businesses have skyrocketed. Divorce settlements often leave women financially secure. In other words, she doesn't need a younger man's admiration. She already commands it in the boardroom. Let me give you a real example. Teresa, 51, biotech executive, mid-seven-figure net worth. She tried dating a 37-year-old gym owner, attractive, disciplined, high energy. But here's what she told me. He kept subtly expecting me to upgrade his lifestyle. He never asked directly, but the assumptions were always there. Trips, restaurants, vacations. She felt like a sponsor, not a partner. And here's the part that shocked her. He resented my success. He admired it in theory, but hated it in practice. Men in their 30s are still in ascension mode. They're still competing, still establishing identity, still forming their place in the hierarchy. So when they meet a woman who's already established, already financially secure, already respected, it triggers conflict in the male ego. Not because they're bad men, because the economic inversion destabilizes gender expectations that they haven't matured beyond yet. Meanwhile, older women have already lived through the economic storms: divorce, child support, career pivots, aging parents, market downturns, business failure, and recovery. They're financially battle-tested in a way most younger men are not. Pattern recognition. The more financially successful a woman becomes, the less value she sees in a younger partner who hasn't yet stabilized. She doesn't want to be a mentor. She doesn't want to be a safety net. She doesn't want to subsidize someone's growth. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Economic compatibility matters more to high-value women in their 40s than physical vitality ever could. Younger men and older women operate on completely different time horizons. A 30-year-old man sees life in 5 to 10-year blocks. Career development, side projects, financial goals, maybe kids later, maybe marriage someday. A 45-year-old high-value woman sees life in 3 to 5 year blocks, not because she's rushed, because she's realistic. She's thinking about retirement planning, long-term health, aging parents, emotional peace, lifestyle, stability, avoiding unnecessary chaos. These timelines don't intersect. Let me show you how this plays out. I had a client, Dana, 48, who dated a 34-year-old man for almost 2 years. He was a good man, loyal, emotionally available, and genuinely loving. But 2 issues kept resurfacing. He wanted kids. She didn't. She'd moved past that chapter. He wanted to relocate for career growth. She'd already built her life, career, and social network where she lived. Every conversation eventually circled back to these 2 conflicts, and both were driven by the same underlying factor: time horizon mismatch. Younger men are still building. Older women are maintaining. Younger men want possibilities. Older women want peace. Younger men are future-focused. Older women are present-focused. And when your timeline doesn't match your partner's timeline, the relationship becomes a negotiation rather than a connection. You've probably seen this too. A younger man feels held back. An older woman feels pressured. He wants expansion. She wants stability. These aren't flaws. They're developmental realities. And here's the uncomfortable truth that makes high-value women walk away early. She's already lived through the chaos of building a life with a man. She doesn't want to rebuild with someone who isn't done building himself. This isn't about age, it's about alignment, and the older the woman, the less tolerance she has for timeline conflict. Now let's get into the part everyone tiptoes around because it's uncomfortable, politically incorrect, and emotionally loaded. High-value women over 40 avoid younger men because biology still shapes behavior, even when modern culture pretends it doesn't. Let me break this down in a calm, clinical way. No shaming, no moralizing. When a woman hits her 40s, something subtle but profound happens. Her biological strategy shifts from reproduction to preservation. This doesn't mean she loses desire, attractiveness, or capacity for connection. It simply means her priorities become deeply rooted in emotional security and stability. Meanwhile, a man in his early 30s, his testosterone is near peak, his libido is high, his competitiveness is high, his risk-taking behavior is high. Those biological factors shape relationship dynamics whether we acknowledge them or not. Let me give you a real example. Claudia, 44, a medical researcher, dated a 31-year-old firefighter. They genuinely cared about each other. Chemistry wasn't the issue, but here's what she told me after they broke up. He was intense, not just sexually, emotionally. He wanted everything fast, everything passionate, everything dramatic. That level of intensity is normal for a man at that stage of life. He's exploring, he's expanding, he's testing his identity, he's driven by ambition and desire. But for a woman in her 40s, that intensity feels destabilizing, not because she can't handle it, but because her biological priorities have shifted. She's thinking about longevity, emotional health, stress reduction, relationship, safety, predictability. He's thinking about competition expansion, legacy, adventure, proving capability. These are fundamentally different biological directives. And here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to articulate. A high-value woman in her 40s doesn't want to become the emotional regulator for a man whose biology pushes him toward volatility. You've seen this. He wants passion. She wants peace. He wants intensity. She wants consistency. He wants the big story. She wants the quiet life that actually works. And once a woman reaches a certain age and maturity, she's not willing to override her biological reality just to match a younger man's pace. Pattern recognition. The older she gets, the more she values emotional predictability, and the less compatible she becomes with a man still driven by high testosterone impulses. This next point is rarely discussed openly, but every high-value woman over 40 is acutely aware of it. Dating a younger man comes with social reputation costs that most women don't want to pay. We live in a culture where people pretend age gaps don't matter, but privately, socially, professionally, they still do. A woman in her 40s dating a man in his early 30s doesn't just get questioned. She gets judged in ways people won't admit publicly. Here are the silent assumptions she encounters. She's financially supporting him. She can't get a man her own age. She's using him for validation. He'll eventually leave for someone younger. She's desperate. Even if none of these things are true, they follow her like a shadow.